In the year 334 BC, on the rugged terrains of Asia Minor, a young king stood at the precipice of history. Before him lay the vast Persian Empire, a colossus that had dominated the ancient world for centuries. This king, a mere 22 years old, was poised to challenge this Goliath. His name was Alexander, later to be known as the Great. You're listening to Casual History. Welcome back to another episode of Casual History. My name is Jeffrey, here with my co-host, as usual, Jacob. And in today's episode, we're delving deep into the life of one of the world's most enigmatic figures, Alexander the Great. His journey from the king of a relatively minor kingdom in the northern Greek peninsula to the ruler of an empire that spanned 3 continents. From the royal courts of Pella to the battlefields of Persia, we'll be exploring not just the battles that made him legendary, but also the lesser-known aspects of his life. His upbringing, his education under the great philosopher Aristotle, and the intricate web of politics and power that he navigated. How you feeling, Jake?
I'm feeling great, man. Welcome back to another episode. I'm ready to get started today. I'm feeling good.
I am too. This one is a Goliath. Not just
Literally.
for him as a figure, but this podcast, the details, the research, the amount of information we have of Alexander the Great. Maybe we should call him Alexander until we figure out why we dubbed him, or they dubbed him, the Great.
I like it. Yeah, and it definitely looks like you've done your research today, so I'm ready to sit back and learn a lot today.
Yeah, it's a hefty one. As I mentioned already in that introduction, we're going to be getting into a lot, so a lot of new information that I didn't have any clue about. Hopefully there's some new things that you, the listener, can pick up, and you as well, Jake. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please stop me, Jacob. But this is a hefty one. I do want to start right at the top and start getting into it, if that's good with you.
Yeah, it was a cold day in the fall of winter. Is that how you're going to set this up? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was born on a cold day.
Yeah. You know how I like to set up the dramatos?
Yeah. That's a good word. I like it. That's a big word for the Casual History podcast, but I'm all for it.
So, in the heart of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, in the year 356 BC, Alexander was born to King Philip II and his formidable wife, Olympias. Great name. From his earliest days, the young prince was immersed in a world of politics and military prowess. His father, Philip, was a visionary leader who transformed Macedonia from a marginal kingdom into a major power in the Greek world. Olympias, his mother, a woman of strong will and intelligence, was a member of the royal house of Epirus, and her marriage to King Philip II was as much a political alliance as it was a union of 2 formidable personalities. And a key note here is she was a devout follower of the cult of Dionysus.
Ooh, have we talked about this before?
No. You're thinking of the Eleusinian mysteries.
Probably, yeah.
Which we've touched on.
So please, enlighten me.
Olympia's religious devotion played a significant role in his upbringing. The Greek god of wine is what this whole cult was about.
What woman doesn't like a little glass of wine? I like a glass of wine. Listen.
Yeah, no, honestly.
Started cold about it.
The description of the cult of Dionysus sounds just like a bunch of people who like to party.
It's just it's a party club. It's like, what do you do in Greek society? This is just a wine club. This is a wine tasting club.
Oh, yeah, and a little bit of drugs. So it was the Greek god of wine, fertility, religious ecstasy, and theater.
Oh, okay.
And the cult was known for its mystical rites and rituals, which included ecstatic dancing and the use of snakes in worship, and nighttime ceremonies. I don't know if that was alluding to something, but nighttime ceremonies is the description.
Okay. How do you get into this cult, Jeffrey? How do you become a member?
That's the one part of my research I did not take into account is how do you become a part of this cult?
Listen, it sounds great.
Yeah, and I think we'd both like to join if it was possible. But his mother's deep involvement in these mystical practices gave her an aura of enigmatic power and mystique, and more than likely influenced her son's perception of divinity in himself and his destiny, which I think is a key piece to Alexander the Great as a figure. Always having that belief that he was destined for greatness. And so Alexander's lineage was not just royal, but steeped in Greek culture and religion. So obviously with his father being a long-standing religious birthright, his mother was also formidable and transformative in what she brought to his life as a kid. And so as a boy, Alexander's education was entrusted to the finest minds of the time. Most notably, at the age of 13, he began studying under Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in history. I'm sure you know this, Jake.
I know you're a huge fan. You're a huge fan.
Yeah, of all
As
the
am
books. And in the verdant groves of Mieza, Aristotle exposed Alexander to a wide range of subjects from philosophy, ethics, to science, and politics, all starting at the age of 13. So way more than the average around subjects and matters that, again, you see the thread as you get into his life, what education does, and especially from the greatest minds, as they categorized it at the time.
Yeah, and that's also the age where like you're the most formidable, right? You're growing, you're learning who you are, what you're learning from your friends, who your mentors are, who you're looking up to at the time. I can see how all this culminated for who he was going to be very soon.
1000%. This education not only sharpened his intellect, but also instilled in him a profound appreciation of Greek culture and thought, elements that would greatly influence his later conquests. But Alexander's path to the throne was not without its challenges. His mom, Olympias, and King Philip were matched, mainly, is what I read, for political reasons. So it's rumored that there was a contentious relationship. They didn't quite really get along. Later in this relationship, after Alexander was born, his father, Philip, took another wife. And I looked this up too because I guess I'm so naive. I was like, did he divorce? Divorce Olympias' mother? What happened?
I mean,
and then I was very quickly shut down, and it was like, no. He just took another wife.
Yeah, he just decided one day.
Yeah, I was very naive with that thought, but got shut down. Anyway, he took another wife whose name was Cleopatra. It's not the Cleopatra you think it is, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
But she was a Macedonian noblewoman, and this marriage was significantly political as well, as it solidified Philip's ties with another powerful faction within Macedonia. However, this new marriage had implications for Olympias and Alexander. The marriage to Cleopatra was viewed by many, including Olympias and potentially Alexander, as a threat to Alexander's position as heir. The birth of a son, Carinus, to Philip and Cleopatra intensified these fears as it raised questions about Alexander's succession and now his brothers. So there's a lot of contention within the courts. There's a lot of contention within, obviously, Alexander, his dad, his mom, and now his other stepmom, Cleopatra, and the new son.
How could there not be?
Do you want to take a guess on how this might end?
In bloody violence, like all of history seems to tell us for some reason.
You're correct.
Of course.
In 336 BC, King Philip II's assassination occurred during a wedding celebration of Philip's daughter. So he has another kid by this point, as all the contention is rising, because obviously there's now another son in the picture. But it was at a wedding celebration of Philip's daughter, Cleopatra, to Alexander I of Epirus, which was also attended by Alexander, his son. So
his son watched his father get struck down at a wedding.
Yes.
Wow. So this is just full on Game of Thrones right now. Just crazy.
Philip was struck down by a former royal bodyguard, so knifed.
Wow.
Basically, they ended up finding out, supposedly, by the way, this is all supposedly because there's a lot of conjecture on was it planted, was it planned?
Yeah, you also spelled traitor wrong, Jeff.
Yeah, traitor. Former royal bodyguard.
Right.
The motives behind the assassination are shrouded in mystery and speculation. Some sources suggest personal revenge, as this royal bodyguard had been wronged by an associate of Philip and felt justice had not been served. Others hint at a deeper political conspiracy, possibly involving Olympias and even Alexander. Although there's no evidence, official evidence.
All conjecture.
But with this assassination, this thrust the young prince into the spotlight immediately. Because he was 20 years old, and obviously the oldest, Alexander was proclaimed king amidst a realm fraught with political instability. So it was still contentious. Everyone didn't know what was going on. And the ambitious young ruler moved swiftly to consolidate his power. He quelled rebellions immediately, subdued dissent, and demonstrated a keen understanding of both diplomacy and force. So one of his first acts as king was to execute the alleged conspirators behind his father's assassination and really just set the tone that I'm not to be fucked with, basically. Yeah. And he then turned to deal with external threats, embarking on campaigns to secure Macedonia's borders and assert its dominance over the Greek city-states.
Yeah, so I just had a question too, because I immediately think of, this may sound a little cold, but also, did he do anything with his, I guess, stepbrother at that point? Because I know, obviously, in consolidating power, you don't want any like loose ends or people coming up later and saying that they are the rightful king. And I can imagine also the second son that was born would feel the same as Alexander did, where obviously he was feeling threatened about who was next in line. Obviously that changed really quickly, but for him, I'm sure in the shadow now, he thinks that he's the rightful heir. And so I wonder if that's going to come to a head too. So I'm excited to learn that.
Yes, he did end up killing the brother shortly after he ascended to the throne.
Gladiator shit, man.
Yeah, it's intense. He made swift, decisive, bold moves that made, again, was an immediate signal to everyone around him, look out, basically. Yeah. And so after this, right, as he's going around on his campaigns to secure the borders and assert his dominance over the Greek city-states, basically the young king's blend of diplomatic acumen and military might was proving to be a formidable combination that was soon to be spread by word of mouth throughout other kingdoms and within his own. As Alexander was securing his position in Greece, Alexander's gaze was immediately fixed on a larger prize, the mighty Persian Empire. 2 years later, in 334 BC, he led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, marking the beginning of his legendary conquests. To fully grasp Alexander's resolve to avenge Greece, one must look back into the earlier half of the 5th century BC. This period was marked by the Greco-Persian Wars, a series of conflicts where the Persian Empire, under rulers like Darius the Great and Xerxes I, attempted to subjugate the Greek city-states. These invasions included pivotal battles such as Marathon, Thermopylae, and Platgeg. Though the Greeks eventually triumphed, the memory of the Persian invasion and the destruction wrought upon Greek lands, including the burning of Athens, lingered in the collective Greek memory. And so as a student of Aristotle and a product of Macedonian and Greek culture, Alexander was well versed in the history of these conflicts. The tales of heroism and the narrative of Greek resistance against Persian aggression were likely integral parts of his education. These stories would have fostered in Alexander not just a sense of Greek identity, but also a feeling of historical grievance against the Persians themselves.
Right, so he's out for revenge, basically.
It's a big piece being revenge, but I also see this as a maneuver, one of his
Yes.
first. He sees there is emotion, there's anger amongst his people, and you solidify your people with a common enemy. And I think when you're young and you have nothing really to go off of, you're a new king, you do need a pillar that people can look to you and rally behind. So I think it's a twofold. I think, yes, this is a revenge story off the top.
But it was a smart one. It was a calculated one, very much so, by a young king who knew, hey, I can rally my troops against Greek culture, right? Like that's what I'm promoting by doing this, right?
Yes.
I'm going to war for selfish reasons for me. This is going to have the full backing of the people because they feel the pain, they know the history.
Yeah, he tapped into the emotional state of his people and said, I can get them to get behind me if I can be the hero in this situation. And so Alexander's ambition in this concept and kingship were influenced by the notion of pan-Hellenism, which I don't know if you know much about, but it's essentially what we just said, the idea of unifying the Greek city-states under a common cause. And by positioning himself as the avenger of Greek humiliations, Alexander was able to rally the support from various Greek states, many of which provided troops for his campaign. And this cause gave Alexander a powerful ideological tool to justify his invasion of the Persian Empire and to establish himself as a leader, not just of Macedonia, but of all Greeks. And that is the starting point for this whole life of Alexander. And so his army, though outnumbered, was a well-oiled machine going into the Persian Empire, comprising of mainly seasoned soldiers and loyal companions who believed in their king's divine destiny. So this theory about him being destined for greatness, and this spread and what led to his rally to go into the Persian Empire, and they bought in. The people bought into this.
It sounds like a completely genius move because you're playing off of people's psyche, right? Like that's naturally how we're wired. We want a cause that's greater than us. And I can see people rallying behind that. You think that's all just in one book?
Yeah, he definitely took it from the King Handbook, I think, how to be a king, how to consolidate power. We're going to start with his military campaigns. And I'm really excited to get into these because I think it shows the reason. I think it gives a pretty resounding reason why people believed in him, why he was seen as the great and the leader that he was. And it's fun to read about. I'm not going to lie. It's fun to read about. And I love this stuff. So if you're good with that, Jake, I think we're going to get into it after this ad break.
I'm so ready.
Thanks for listening to that ad. It helps support the podcast, helps myself and Jacob keep this thing going with new episodes every week, and helps us sustain. We would love to make this a full-time job. It's not. You can tell by the name. We're casual. It's history.
Right.
But we want to be. We want to be professional history.
Professional history? Will we officially change our name whenever that happens?
We
fully
could
rebrand.
We just need to buy the .com right now.
Oh, man.
But we have social media, Casual X History on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the works.
You can't miss us.
We're jumping back into his greatest military campaigns. And it starts with the Battle of Granicus, which happened in the spring of 334 BC. Alexander the Great faced his major test on Asian soil at the river Granicus, near the ancient city of Troy, in modern-day Turkey. This battle was the opening move in Alexander's ambitious campaign to conquer the Persian Empire. The Persian satraps, or governors under the rule of Darius III, had gathered a sizable force to check Alexander's advance into Asia Minor. The Persian army, composed mainly of cavalry and a small number of Greek mercenaries, took a defensive position on the eastern bank of the Granicus River. Their strategy was to prevent Alexander's forces from crossing the river, using the natural barrier to their advantage. The Persians believed that their position in the river itself would make it difficult for Alexander's troops to attack effectively. But just you wait, Jake. Alexander, known for his boldness and tactical ingenuity, did not hesitate. Rejecting the advice of some of his generals to delay the attack to figure out a better plan, he ordered an immediate assault, leading to a cavalry charge. He plunged into the river with his cavalry, directly engaging the Persian forces. This move was risky and unexpected. The steep riverbanks and the barrage of projectiles from the Persian line threw them off guard, and it was this decisive moment that came when Alexander, displaying remarkable bravery, led to a cavalry charge against a group of Persian nobles. And in fierce combat, Alexander himself was nearly killed.
You can only imagine what they were thinking on the other side of that river going, normal tactics state that we're completely safe here, right? Like for the most part. Here they are, they just see a cavalry charge running straight towards the river and like totally being, put off guard. I can imagine that could be a really terrifying sight.
Essentially, this audacity of him charging into the Persian formation threw the entire expectation out of whack.
Right.
As he was doing this, Macedonian phalanx infantry crossed the river. So that phalanx word, Phalanx, Google it if you're listening, so you can see what it looks like, is a formation and a type of infantry that was at the spearhead of his army. They crossed the river, engaging the Persian and mercenary infantry in close combat, and broke through the lines and basically led to a decisive victory. This victory was more than just a military success. It was a statement from Alexander.
That was the genius behind him, is he had the forethought at that time that he was thinking through those things going, they're not going to expect me to do this. If I'm going to win this campaign, I'm going to need to jump outside the norms and catch them by surprise. How can I do that? And it also, you're right, it let the world know, like, expect the unexpected. Do not, be ready for anything when their army rolls up.
Which creates a myth and creates this sort of figure of Alexander.
Yeah, and terror. You can imagine that spreading around of eventually, obviously this is going to grow more than just one battle, but I'm sure that this continues, and that just continues to be the ghost of Alexander haunting other armies going, they don't follow rules and tactics and what you would believe would be the smart move here, and that's what makes them so terrifying.
Yeah, it laid a foundation for him as a king and as a military expert. And it opened the path for Alexander's further advance into Asia Minor and demonstrated to the world that the young Macedonian king was not here just to challenge the Persian Empire, but to topple it. Which leads to the next campaign just a year later. So after his victory at Ginnicus in 333 BC, Alexander faced one of his most significant challenges, the Battle of Issus. Here, the Macedonian king encountered the Persian king himself, Darius III. This battle occurred in a region fraught with geographic challenges. The battlefield was located in a narrow plain sandwiched between the towering Amanus Mountains to the east and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. This constricted terrain was unusual for major battles of this era, which typically took place on wider plains conducive to large-scale cavalry and infantry maneuvers. But before we jump into this battle, like I mentioned earlier, it's essential to understand the Macedonian phalanx, which was a revolutionary military formation that was central to Alexander's strategy. The phalanx was a dense infantry formation, typically 8 to 16 men deep. Each soldier, known as a phalangite, was equipped with a sarissa, which was a long spear averaging 18 to 20 feet in length. This weapon gave the phalanx an extraordinary reach, allowing soldiers to strike the enemies before they could even get close to respond effectively. So the strength of the phalanx lay in its cohesion and discipline. You had to be in tight step with your partner to your left and to your right.
Yeah.
And you had to trust them.
A beautiful dance.
These phalangites moved as a unit, creating a wall of spears that was nearly impenetrable to enemy cavalry and infantry in battle. The phalanx was the centerpiece upon which the Alexander's hammer, the companion cavalry, would strike. So he was always in that 1-2 position. He was in the cavalry, his phalanx was in the center of the spear, basically holding down the fort.
Yeah.
Marching slowly, ever present, pushing these people back, and the cavalry would wreak havoc. and come in and destroy armies and break through the traditional line. This battle in particular was an interesting one because the reason why I mentioned the geographic location was because it is unusual. The typical era of wide open plains and their formations, you're able to really see these things in full view.
Right.
This led to a different tactic from Alexander. It posed a significant challenge, rather, for Alexander and for both armies at that point. For the Persians, led by Darius III, the limited space restricted the deployment of their larger army, which they did. They outnumbered the Macedonians by a lot at this point. It restricted the deployment of the Persians and negated some of the numerical advantages. For Alexander, the terrain meant a more complex use of his flanks and cavalry. However, Alexander turned this terrain limitations into an advantage, as he seems to do more often than not in these battles. The narrow battlefield prevented the Persians from fully extending their line, making them vulnerable to focused, small, direct attacks.
Which is perfect for his army.
It seems to be. He placed his powerful Macedonian flanks in the center to engage and pin down the Persian forces, and on the flanks where the plain met the sea and the mountains. He positioned his cavalry, including the elite companion cavalry, on the right flank, where he could lead the charge. So he had his own crew of posse. That's basically what that is when it's saying elite companion cavalry. They're his best of the best. They surrounded him. He had his tight crew.
Dude, they had to be the baddest men on the planet, huh? I can only imagine you roll up and you're just like, oh yeah, this is my crew. These are my guys. Like,
yeah, they protected, they were his core. And they were the companion cavalry to him leading the charge. And that's what he did. He led. He didn't sit in the back. He took, the reins, which is a funny figure of speech.
That's a good one.
Lends well here. But during this battle, Alexander led a bold cavalry charge again against the Persian left flank. This area, closer to the sea, offered more room for cavalry maneuvers, and Alexander and his companion cavalry, his crew, renowned for their mobility and combat prowess, broke through the Persian lines. This maneuver not only exploited the limited space on the battlefield, but also targeted a critical role in the Persian formation, causing disarray among their troops. So he broke through in this small formation with only his crew on the left side of this formation, and chaos ensued, basically.
Just think of the morale. Think of the morale that happens, right? You have a larger army, you walk in, it's a young king, unexperienced, you think green, and like the king is there beside you, and a smaller force somehow breaks through, decimates your forces, changes the entire battlefield to their advantage. Like, I can't help but just imagine.
And they see who's leading this charge to break through.
The king was leading the charge.
With his crew, his posse.
Yeah, dude.
Which is just such a badass story. Like, whether that's playing to my masculinity, I don't know, but it gets me.
I don't know, man.
It gets me.
These are so, like, I love this. This gets my blood pumping just, like, listening to these things, too, because I can visualize this, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I cannot help but just, like, put myself in the shoes of facing that army and like having one expectation and then just totally tossing that out the window every single time you met him.
Well, Darius III, we touched on that because the opposing king, positioned near the center of the Persian line, found himself at this point in a vulnerable spot after they broke through.
Right.
As the Macedonian flanks pressed forward, right, ever inching slowly forward with their 18 feet long spears. And basically, as the cavalry broke through on the flank, the terrain, which initially seemed to be a Persian advantage, became their undoing as their forces were squeezed between the advancing Macedonians and the natural barriers of the mountains and the sea. So, realizing the battle was lost, Darius fled.
You don't want to die there. Not to a young king. Like, that would ruin his... This as much as this battle would probably ruin his reputation going back home, better to live and fight another day, than to die on the battlefield.
We'll see, because this move precipitated the collapse of the Persian army's morale and cohesion, leading to Alexander's second victory.
Wow.
So we're on number 2 right now, okay?
Okay.
But that was a really important one. You'll see Darius come back around in this story.
Okay.
So Alexander's next major military endeavor was the Siege of Tyre in 332 BC. And if you've noticed, these are one after another. He's not slowing down.
Yeah.
He's going from one to the next to the next. He's like, I'm 22. I'm ready to go. So by this point, he'd be 25.
Yeah.
He's still going after it.
No hesitation.
No hesitation. And so this siege, there was a lot here that I could have dove into, but at the end of the day, I can wrap it up quickly because I want to get into some of the other battles themselves.
Right.
But this siege was a heavily fortified city on an island, and it posed a significant challenge. Undeterred, Alexander embarked on an ambitious engineering feat, building a causeway to reach the island. So imagine you're on this island.
Oh my
He
God.
they said, oh, they can't touch us. We're okay. We'll be safe here, I think.
You're never safe.
And he's like, you know what we're gonna do? I'm just gonna build a causeway directly to you, so you can't escape me. And that's what he did. And despite facing fierce resistance all along the way, along with setbacks in the building of this causeway, including the destruction of parts of it at different points in time by the Tyrian forces.
Well, yeah.
It didn't deter Alexander. He's like, well, we're gonna get this done. We'll be fine. But it took him longer than the other 2 battles. So, but not that long, honestly. After a grueling 7 months siege, the city fell. And Alexander's determination and ability to adapt to the unique challenges, no matter where you were.
Yeah, because apparently it doesn't matter. I will build a fucking way to you. If I can't find you, I will build a goddamn ladder. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's, oh, dude. Okay.
Insane.
This is getting crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So this led to the 3rd victory in his military campaign. And again, just added more to the mythos and more to his demonstration of military versatility and relentless pursuit, no matter where you were, from what it reads to be from the history that we know, intentional. Again, you set out to do something. I'm not going to stop till it gets done. So that way, there's no hope. Like if you're facing if you're facing Alexander and you think, oh, he's not going to be able to get to me. Oh, we have this or that. He's demonstrating time and time again, no matter what it is, I'm going to find a way. No matter if it takes 7 months, I'm going to get you.
And when that's been the precedence of every other battle that you have faced, like that going out the window and that completely changing on you, that's the game changer, right? It's also psychological. War is not just fought on a battlefield, it's also fought in your mind. And he's playing both games at the same time. He's playing 4D chess. 1000%.
And the climax of this military campaign for Alexander came at the Battle of Gaugamela, fought on October 1st, 331 BC. 1 year later again, he's 26 at this point. This man came into power at 20. He started his military campaign after securing his homeland. It took 2 years to do that, secure everyone together, and said, all right, let's go. And it's been year after year after year. And so this became really his peak. It was set on the plain near the village of Gaugamela, east of the Tigris River. Gaugamela presented a vast open field, which Darius III chose deliberately to maximize the effectiveness of his larger army, particularly his chariot force and cavalry. So, reoccurring figure, king says, all right, this is enough. Darius had learned from the defeat previously and prepared extensively for this encounter. He even had the battlefield leveled to facilitate the movement of his war chariots. His army, significantly larger, essentially he brought in everyone. That's the story. Man. Yes, he says, this is it. We're going to put everybody here. You're not getting any farther.
We're going to put Alexander in the ground and I'm going to become a hero. That's what he wanted.
That's what he would have liked. I don't want to spoil it for you. But his army, significantly larger than Alexander's, was arrayed in a massive line, with cavalry on both wings and an infantry in the center. Darius positioned himself in that center, surrounded by his best troops, including the elite Persian immortals, which I know you probably know of who that is, which is just
Yes.
hearing the name Persian Immortals, I was geeking. So
Wild.
Alexander's approach to Guatemala was marked by innovative tactics. Once again, he deployed his forces in a diagonal echelon formation. So a new formation, with the phalanx at the center angled towards the right. This formation was intended to counter the expected flanking movements by the Persian cavalry, and Alexander himself commanded the right flank. So again, he said, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be in that center, and I'm going to be commanding this thing. He was in charge of the right flank, leading the companion cavalry. Again, with his crew, he said, you're not getting over here.
Oh, wait, what? You thought I was going to come with the same game plan? Oh, no.
Yeah,
no, man.
no, exactly. And the battle's turning point came when Alexander spotted a gap in the Persian lines. So on the right side, they were in the midst of battle, and he spotted a gap, likely created by the shifting of Persian troops to counter the angled Macedonian formation. So again, at the hands of direct changes that he made, he said, I know that what they're gonna be expecting is what they saw the last time. And I know that this is a different playing field. He came and again surprised Darius, who had to be seething, that this is different. This is not what he expected. He put all this preparation. He threw all his people at this battle specifically to stop him. And it came down to his formation change that led to a gap in the Persian troops to counter the Macedonian formation. And so, seizing this opportunity as he does, with no hesitation, Alexander led a decisive cavalry charge, which he becomes known for. I think there's a bit of trust here in his army as well, because if you go through that gap, I don't know that there's any guarantee that that gap's not going to close. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
Like your people might get pushed back, and then you're dying.
Yeah, you're encircled by the enemy.
So there's so much trust that has to go in here too into your army. And when he makes this quick decision of, we're charging right now, we have to do this.
And they're like, all right, let's go.
Your boys roll. And they did. This gap that formed was aimed directly at Darius. So it just so happened Darius was on the other side of this gap.
That's not the place you want to be.
No, it's not. This maneuver was a masterstroke in creating disarray in the Persian ranks and directly threatening Darius himself. There is a bit of chaos theory here where when everything's orderly and you're attacking as normal, you can kind of keep things in hand. When you see a mistake, I think that's what he did the best. He capitalized on a mistake. I'm going to pounce on it, and I know that once this breaks, even psychologically, the people around you, the fear breaks, and then I'm threatening your king. Like the whole thing changed, the battlefield changes.
Yep.
And that's what directly led to the breakdown in Persian morale, was the direct threat of Darius. And again, Darius being there at the other end of Alexander charging through with his cavalry, and Darius in a chariot fled the battlefield.
Again? Oh, man.
Yes, I know.
For the second time, I was expecting he was about to be done. I thought the boy's toast.
Well, this shouldn't have happened.
Right.
They had all the things at the time that would have made them superior. The Persian lines collapse, and the Macedonians pressed their advantage, turning the battle into another and one of his greatest decisive victories.
Okay, Jeffrey, I got a question to present to you, because I want to see what you think. Just after hearing all this is wild. But so say we invent time travel, right? And you go back and you don't get any say on when you go back, and you somehow get dropped into Darius's lines, but you can bring one modern item to help you. What would you be bringing?
Does it have to be something I can carry?
No, I guess not.
No
rules.
Oh, then you're leaving me with a bomb.
Oh my God. I bring a tank to the battlefield.
I think we should limit it. You have to be able to carry it on your persons.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. Let's do that. Like, so you have to be able to carry it on your persons. You're dropped right in the middle of this battle, and there are forces running at you. What do you have?
What could protect me? Not much.
Not against thousands of people. Part of me wants to go with something really fun. Like, I don't know if you've seen all those movies where it's usually like King Arthur movies where there's a person that comes from the future that gets dropped into like the past of that time. And then all of a sudden something crazy happens and they pretend that they did it and it's like, oh, you're a wizard. It'd be something like that. It'd be something like a flamethrower or something crazy, like a staff that hides a gun barrel, just so that way I could point it at people and like no one would mess with me. I think I would hit two people and they'd be like, I don't know what you're working, but I don't want it. I think that would change the game.
I'd come in wearing a robe.
There you go.
And a staff that could shoot fire. And then I become this mystic.
Yeah, dude. And then you just become the right-hand man of the king. Yeah, I just use, terrible magic to take down your enemies. I wonder how they would have handled something like that, like a flamethrower, seeing that in action. Maybe he would have figured something out.
You would need all of the tactics. You would need all the tricks. But I think settling on becoming a mage of some sort, a wizard, and you playing that role is your best bet. And I'm going to go with that as well. But after this, so after you show up as a mage and still lose since you're on the other side, and they win, Alexander faced another task, right? So after you're capturing these lands, it was governing these lands. And so this is another pillar that led to Alexander being such a figure and leading to a lot of good as well. And it stretched from the Balkans of Egypt into the heart of the Persian Empire. Alexander's approach to administration was innovative at the time. He adopted a policy of fusion, integrating elements of Persian and Macedonian governments. In regions like Egypt and Babylon, Alexander respected existing administrative structures, keeping many local officials in place. This not only facilitated smoother transitions, but also helped in the gaining of loyalty of the new subjects. In Persia, Alexander adopted Persian court customs and even married Roxana, a Bactrian princess, to reinforce the unity between his Macedonian and Persian subjects. One of Alexander's most lasting impacts was the spread of Greek culture, known as Hellenization. Greek became the lingua franca, facilitating trade and communication across diverse regions. Alexander founded or re-established several cities, most notably Alexandria in Egypt. These cities were not just administrative centers, but also hubs of learning and culture where Greek and local traditions merged. In these cities, Alexander encouraged the settlement of Greek colonists and the establishment of institutions like theaters, gymnasiums, and temples, which became centers of Hellenistic culture. This blending of cultures, though sometimes met with resistance, left a lasting imprint on the regions under his rule. However, Alexander's administrative policies were not without challenges. His attempts to integrate Macedonian and Persian elites, including the mass wedding at Susa, where he married off his generals to Persian noblewomen, was met with resistance from both sides. His adoption of Persian customs and dress alienated his Macedonian troops, who saw this as a betrayal of their Greek heritage. But despite all of these challenges, Alexander's vision of an empire where diverse cultures coexisted and interacted was revolutionary at the time. His administrative acumen, though sometimes overshadowed by his military exploits, was a key factor in the initial stability and cultural richness of his vast empire. In Alexandria, the cultural and intellectual traditions of Greece intermingled with those of Egypt, Persia, and beyond. It was in this environment that significant advancements were made. The mathematician Euclid formulated the famous principles of geometry here. The astronomer Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth with remarkable accuracy, and the city was also a center for medical knowledge, with figures like Herophilus advancing the study of anatomy. But I do want to point out here that Alexander's untimely death that's to come meant that he would not see through the full realization of his plans for Alexandria, and a lot of the great things we know of Alexandria were built after his death.
Okay. What happened? What happened to our boy? What happened?
Alexander, at this point, embarked on what would become his last military campaign and challenge. I had no clue about this part also, by the way. He actually invaded India.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. His army crossed the daunting Hindu Kush Mountains, arriving in a land vastly different from any he had previously encountered. He faced war elephants in unfamiliar terrain, and despite significant victories, again, including the Battle of Hydaspes against King Porus, a new challenge emerged, which he had not faced at this point, which was the weariness and discontent of his troops. They had marched thousands of miles from home and fought countless battles. Internal strife grew, and their desire to return home was made clear. These guys just wanted to go home, man.
Yeah, man. Haven't we won enough? Send us home, damn it.
Dude, he was on a tear. He was on a tear. Like from the moment he got into becoming king to now, he didn't really stop. And so that's ultimately what led to his campaign stopping. Him going, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's head back home. They did eventually make the grueling embark back to Babylon. During this period, what we know is that Alexander was already planning future campaigns and strategies for consolidating his vast empire. So he had taken pieces of India. His empire had grown so much. Also envisioned further expansions westward into Arabia and possibly circumnavigating Africa.
Wow.
So that's some of the pieces that we could pick up on where his mind was, and his mind was always more. But I'm sad to say he doesn't go out like you probably expect him to. You'd think he would go out in a blaze of glory in the midst of a military charge gone wrong, or someone stabbing him in the back because he was too powerful. Some story that typically you find at the end of these didn't happen. It was in 323 BC, when he was 32 years old at this point. After returning to Babylon, Alexander fell ill, and the circumstances of his illness remain a subject of speculation and debate among historians. Some suggest natural causes, while there are hints of possible poisoning. It really could just come down to he got sick with a disease and died, which is not uncommon.
Not great medicine back then, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like that would happen more often than you would think.
100%. And this death of Alexander the Great marked the end of an era. A 12-year run of just full blaze in military campaigns as well as change. He enacted so much change and diversity, and he laid the seeds for what would come from this environment that he established. And so we feel his remnants today in the way that democracy, Greek culture was influenced across that period of time. The cities that he built, like Alexandria, and what led to us being who we are as humans. He's a key figure, and no small task to read up about and try to put this podcast together. But I wanted to end on an interesting note. Maybe it's a question you would have, or someone listening might have had, which would be, okay, he died. What happened? In the wake of his death, it left a vacuum because it was sudden. There's no one directly to take the throne. So basically at this point, his empire stretched from Greece to the fringes of India, faced an uncertain future. Alexander did have children, the first one being Alexander,
right.
What am I going to name my kid? Alexander, of course, with a lady named Roxana, who he married in 327 BC. And he was born after Alexander the Great's death. So his wife was pregnant. And so as the only legitimate son of Alexander, he was named king.
Oh, wow.
But given his infancy, regents were obviously appointed to rule on his behalf. And this is it's not going to do after you having Alexander the Great as a king. This reign of basically
a baby,
not a baby,
or advisors, honestly, advisors. But it's funnier to say a baby.
Yeah, I didn't know how to put that, so that was great. Was short and chaotic. It marked by power struggles and the Game of Thrones, right? Like they were all vying, ate each other alive, basically. And the son was eventually murdered. And so without a clear heir to the throne at this point, Alexander's generals, known as the Diadochi, these generals who had been loyal companions, his crew that we talked about, right? His companion cavalry, basically now turned against each other in a series of conflicts and wars where the empire was eventually carved up with different generals controlling different territories. And so these kingdoms continued to bear the imprint of Alexander's influence, but the dream of a united empire under one ruler was lost. The Hellenistic period, marked by the blending of Greek and Eastern cultures, continued within these kingdoms, but the political landscape had irrevocably been changed. And in the end, Alexander's story is a testament to the indelible impact of one individual on the course of history, something that I know you and I love both, that we can directly trace changes in the world as we know it to one figure. His military conquest reshaped the map of the ancient world, but perhaps more significantly, his legacy continued to influence the course of human civilization long after his untimely demise. From the libraries of Alexandria to the far reaches of the Hellenistic kingdoms, the echoes of Alexander's ambitions can still be felt today, a reminder of the profound ways in which history is shaped by the confluence of vision, power, and circumstance.
Dude, fantastic pod, man. This is incredible. Amazing.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was so much to get into.
It was a lot, but it was great.
I'm exhausted.
It was great, man. Now we rest until we rise again once more next week for another podcast. But seriously, thank you guys so much for listening again to Casual History. Your support means the absolute world to us, everybody that's still listening and continues to listen on a weekly basis. Of course, we do have our website if you want to contact us at any point or give us suggestions, right? So that'll be Casual X History on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate your support. If you made it this far, drop us a comment. I do want to know what you think. Have you guys heard this story in full before? If not, how'd I do? What'd I mess up? I do want to know, honestly. I did my best. But again, you know the name, Casual History. We'll see you next week.